MLB playoffs are underway, and RIP to baseball's hit king Pete Rose, with special guest Billy Bases on this episode of the Scho-Zone. All right, welcome to the Scho-Zone. It's your host, Ryan Schofield. I'm coming at you live now from my little makeshift studio I've got going on here, and I've got an exciting little show for me today. Anyways, I finally get to have a very special guest on here. I don't know if anybody you care about it. You won't even see him. It's just going to be audio, but one of my favorite people to chat baseball with. We're going to call him Billy Bases. Believe it or not, some people that have professional careers interact with me. Maybe associating themselves with me is not always the best look, but Bill's one of my favorite baseball conversations out there. In fact, I would say me and Bill are just kind of acquaintances through other friends from a couple of years ago. I still talk to him as much as I talk to anybody from my past because, well, I can always have a good baseball conversation. So without further ado, I'm going to bring in Mr. Billy Bases. This is going to be audio only. Bill, welcome to the Scho-Zone. How are we doing today?
Ryan, good to be here. How you doing?
Oh, fantastic. Wow, look at you sounding all professional and everything.
Yeah, I'm using my iPad. It seems to be the best tool for the job here.
Yeah, well, I mean, I know that you have to be able to look up stats while you talk. It's impossible for you to not be able to do both of those. So whatever works best for you, man, because you're like kind of like you're like my stats and research department. I just poke the bear and then I spit it gets spit right back to me.
Yeah, I have this like crazy setup in front of me. I've got like two screens for like my work setup and then like a third screen that I have like my like personal computer on. So
well, it's one of those things.
We're in the command zone.
Completely unrelated, but it's like the fact is that as somebody who actually still has to go to work, I'm not in a remote setting. I still would say that maybe about 30% of the time there, I'm actually doing something for the company. The other 70% is keeping myself occupied, so I'm there for the other 30%.
Right.
That's been one of the biggest shams out there is that people when it goes from remote versus being in person, it's just like people think of how much time they just kill throughout the day. We're idiots for working as much as we do. We don't need to be at work that much.
Dude, right. I think I'm more productive at home personally. There's something about being in the office, man. It sucks me dry.
But, well, I mean, I'm not going to be too productive today because, well, today's one of those few days that's actually awesome to have a weekday off. And that's going to be because we got the, full day of MLB playoff games. I missed yesterday, but I don't really think I missed too much in terms of the excitement. A buddy of mine just kind of pointed out, he's like, from now on, every year, I'm just going to bet game one of every wild card series under. Small sample size, but usually this first game of the wild card, since we've undergone this new playoff format, is a very low scoring game. I mean, obviously, you're going to have ace pitchers out there, and I think the people are a little bit tight, but only really the Brewers and the Mets put up runs yesterday. Actually, there was only one home run in 4 games yesterday. That was by Fernando Tatis, who I mean, I guess right now it's just kind of starting. I mean, we all know that, all the series are up 1-0. We got the Astros lost, which that was a shock to me. Same with the Orioles wasn't so much of a shock. This is why I hate the new playoffs. I don't look at the Orioles. I mean, they would have still been a playoff team, but the Orioles and the Royals, they're not very good baseball teams to me.
Yeah, the Orioles definitely have not been a good baseball team the second half of the season. The thing about the Orioles, though, is that they have good players, which is tough.
They do, and I mean, like that's the thing is that I'll tell you as somebody who gambles.
That carried the Padres and the Phillies to the NLCS a couple of years ago, just having good players. Remember, they weren't necessarily the best teams all year, but when the playoffs came, in these small sample sizes, the 1 or 2 players can swing a series.
Well, and not for nothing. That's what the thing is. I feel like that the Phillies, like that describes the Phillies this year because who are the Phillies? Are they that team that was leaps and bounds ahead of all of Major League Baseball? Or the team that's been basically a below 500 team for a good portion of the season? But when they get to the playoffs, I'm like, oh my God, they still have Wheeler and Nola, and they still have a pretty deep lineup.
I don't know. Nola's the most important person in the playoffs.
What's that?
I think Nola is the most important single player in the playoffs.
So
you know what you're getting from Wheeler, and the bullpen's been all right, and the back half of the rotation's been good. If you get good Nola, who's beating the Phillies in the NL?
Right. That's where I mean, like, because the whole thing I've been going on is that I don't trust the Dodgers. And honestly, I feel even worse is that, you just the two hottest hitters on the planet right now are Jose Ramirez and Shohei Ohtani, and they both have to stop playing baseball for a week.
Scary. They're scary guys.
And as I look at where I always give that nod, I mean, first off, the Phillies did, they played head to head against the Dodgers. They were 5-1 this year, I believe. But also, I'm telling you, as a guy he pitched for the Cardinals, the fact that the Dodgers are going to be relying on Jack Flaherty, I will trust you that is going to backfire on you. He's going to.
I feel like the wheels fell off as soon as he came over from Detroit. Detroit's got some secret juice or something, man. They got something going on with those pitchers.
It's amazing that and that's where, again, Skubal, he gives them the chance. And that's always what's great about these series is that, I hate that for the sense of that, Skubal's that good. And now it's the Astros who had a much better season, or not really much better, but again, winning their division, they now have their backs against the wall against a sort of inferior team. It is hilarious, though, the Tigers got rid of Flaherty and stopped playing Javi Baez, and all of a sudden, everything's great. But
yeah, I think AJ Hinch is an outstanding manager. I think he's one of the few guys who makes a difference in the game.
So here's a player I want to discuss with you who I think can swing the postseason. And I just know that you love to evaluate people on their historics. Can you think of we're probably about halfway through his career. Can you think of a more interesting player than Kyle Schwarber? This guy might hit 500 home runs and not even have a WAR of 30 for his career.
No, he's like, I want to compare him to like a Dunn or like a Chris Davis, but like, you gotta like a big part of Schwarber's legacy is going to be the playoff games, right?
Well, the thing is that goes on is that every team that he plays with, everyone says he's the favorite guy in the clubhouse.
Yeah, that goes a long way.
I mean, that's a big. I mean, everyone wants to shit on him as a leadoff hitter, but he produces, and I mean, it's not a typical scenario, but in terms of guys who can hit the ball. I mean, he hits the ball as hard as anybody, but the thing I like about him, he does it against good pitching. That's a huge difference maker is that, it's one thing to hit a 490-foot blast off of a fucking fifth starter in Colorado. It's another thing when you take Darvish fucking 490 feet deep in the playoffs, like.
Oh, I mean, he, I think I'm a big analytics guy, but I kind of diverge from analytics in terms of the leadoff hitter. I think it's such an advantage to start a game, and that opposing starting pitcher has to go against Kyle Schwarber or like a Shohei Ohtani or like whoever you want to put there.
Right, because I mean, for starters, I mean, every pitcher wants to throw a first pitch strike, and that's a guy that you throw a cookie up there, it ain't coming back.
931 playoff OPS for Schwarber, by the way.
Yeah, no, I mean, I just think of I mean, again, the worst 2016, the ball he hit that went to the top of the scoreboard in Wrigley as a Cardinals fan. That was like one of the like, holy shit.
Didn't they encase that ball up there or something? They like built a little like structure for it.
It stayed up there, but like ultimately, I like the idea of even how Schwarber's career came to be about of that. I believe he was the second pick overall. And it's like, yeah, this guy's just got one tool. It's just really fucking good. Like, let's take a guy who's just great at one thing and just run with it. Kyle Schwarber is just nothing but a power hitter, and that's fine. I mean,
remember he came up as a catcher?
He was a catcher. I mean, I guess you could say he was a catcher. I mean,
he was catcher eligible in fantasy for a couple of years with the Cubs.
Right. And then they moved him to the outfield, and then he hurt himself in that one terrible play. But I mean, also, I would say the transformation of him is that also remember, first off, with a name like Kyle Schwarber, I'm not expecting a slap hitting second baseman. I am expecting exactly what I got,
Yeah. He's short too. I think he's sub 6 foot. He's just a barrel of a man.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just fucking, I mean, they say kind of strong, but
he's listed at 6 foot even. So,
but he's a guy that I think that, I just look at because, we're talking about these being some tight scoring games. And I mean, that's the thing with the Phillies is that I almost want to throw out the regular season a little bit. It's that when they get into the list of names you get there, you don't get this with the Dodgers. The Dodgers, you get a top heavy lineup. When you get down to the bottom and it's like, okay, we got to get Bryson Stott out. It's like, you can have worse options as your 9 hitter. I must say.
You want to hear an interesting list? I looked up most postseason home runs. So Manny Ramirez leads that list. These are the top five. It's Manny Ramirez, Altuve's second, Bernie's third, Bernie Williams, and then tied for fourth, Derek Jeter and Kyle Schwarber.
It's
Then Pujols is next, by the way. I know you know.
So this list is only going to get more like clouded up because of how much more we're adding to the postseason. Like it's a nice
and
little
Schwarber's
trophy.
Still playing, yeah.
It's a nice little trophy to have, but I don't really value postseason. Like I look at the percentages, the OPS you stood out there. I mean, it's hilarious to me as a Cardinals fan. You know, Carlos Beltran has one of the most infamous, strikeouts in postseason baseball. But Carlos Beltran is like one of the
postseason hitters ever.
He's like it's like Babe Ruth and Carlos Beltran on the list of postseason hitters for percentage wise things. And even more frustrating for Mets fans, he did a lot of damage for the Cardinals in the postseason. Back when the Cardinals used to make the postseason and actually be productive, I think those days are kind of gone by the wayside a little bit.
You know what? Schwarber plays a lot of games too. I'm looking at his just on his baseball reference page. This is his best year as a pro by WAR, but 150 games, 3.5, yeah. 150 games this year, 160 last year, 155 the year before. Those are the 3 years he's been in Philadelphia. I mean, he's only missed 21 total games, 7 a year. That's awesome.
Well, I mean, he's not in the field. There is an advantage to that, and he is kind of your 3 true outcomes kind of guy. So, I mean, you don't really get hurt when you're walking back to the dugout, walking down to first base, or jogging around the bases.
Right. Led the NL and walks this year.
But but I will say that my picks, I have them flashing on the bottom line, and I mean, I'm hurting on one of them, looking good on the other. I was liking the Braves for a little while towards down the stretch. Then, I mean, if you tell me that they lose Chris Sale starting into the, going to the playoffs, that's obviously a huge blow there. And I mean,
imagine saying that in April. Imagine.
That as a gambler, the remorse that I have of that people were just like the number of people like that I follow that were like, I think that you could get Sale at like 100-1 odds or whatever before the season to win the Cy Young, where it's just like, hey, what's the worst that could happen kind of thing. You don't expect to win those bets. But then, I mean, I said at the time when the Braves made that trade, I'm like, that's such a great fucking move. There's nothing but upside that can come of it. And then Chris Sale, I mean, who just, by the way, sealed his Hall of Fame candidacy with this Cy Young, I believe.
Yeah, for sure. It was the only thing missing.
I mean, not that he was even really missing. I'm not going to hold it again. I mean, he has a pretty tremendous body of work going on for him. But
in today's game, without getting to the 300 wins ever again, I think a Hall of Fame pitcher, they absolutely need a Cy Young, and a World Series ring's really nice.
Right? But again, I mean, the Cy Young is it's a little bit. It's it's one of my least favorite things is when people are like, can you believe that Nolan Ryan never won a Cy Young? It's like, well, I can when I look at the seasons that he had his best seasons because somebody else had a better season. Like, so
he's like the bulk guy of all bulk guys, right?
What's that?
Like just a guy who, like, the amount of innings he threw was just incredible in the game he played. Because, like, inning counts had started to tick down a little bit by the 70s from where they were in, like, the 50s. And, like, this dude was, like, he was, like, a throwback in his own time,
Oh, we're talking about Sale right now?
No, I was talking about Nolan Ryan.
Right. I mean, Sale kind of, too. I mean, Sale was consistently putting up 200 innings for a while, which is, it's sad to say that we look at, we have to just subtract 100 from pitching for everything. 300 wins doesn't matter. It's 200 wins now. If no one's going to get 400 strikeouts in a season anymore. It's going to be fucking 300 strikeouts at best. And
even that's an incredible season.
I mean, I just kind of laugh of that, like, when Kershaw was in his heyday, which this is always a fun one to have. Kershaw or Randy Johnson?
Oh, Randy Johnson.
I just always laughed at it. It's like, Randy Johnson was doing what he was doing when striking out wasn't cool.
Randy Johnson's possibly the best left-handed pitcher ever. You can go back and forth with him and I mean, there's a couple of guys like Warren Spahn.
Well, and I just laugh at that. This was a fun, one I got in with where, Jose Ramirez, another player I just mentioned here about, taking the break or whatever, who almost went 40 here. He didn't get 40-40, right? He had 39 home runs.
Yeah.
He was going to have the most silent 40-40 home run, 40-40 season. It was only going to be the 7th ever. And we were just going to kind of be like, oh, by the way, this guy did this too.
Yeah, he's going to be like 5th in MVP voting.
And what's terrible is I said this and I got some shit for it from some people, but I was like, you know what? The worst thing is that he's probably going to be remembered for being the guy that knocked out Tim Anderson. And someone was like, and someone said, oh, that's not true. And I'm like, look, Randy Johnson, if you watch the Greg Maddux documentary, himself said, I've got this many strikeouts, this many wins, and everyone knows me for killing a bird. So, it's not.
What's your favorite Randy Johnson moment? Is it thrown at John Kruk?
My favorite Randy Johnson moment is Game 7 of the World Series.
Yeah.
I mean, the idea that we just. It's unheard. I mean, first off, we would never let. I mean, a pitcher. They would never let anybody do that. I don't think anymore.
Not post Bumgarner.
No, I mean, but even Bumgarner wasn't on 1 day's rest. Johnson pitched the day before, if I'm not mistaken. I don't believe Bumgarner.
That free agent contract he signed with the Diamondbacks, for the initial one, 4 years, 4 Cy Youngs, and a World Series. I don't think it gets better than that for free agent deals.
Well, I mean, as they looked on there, is that Randy Johnson, I forget what from just his career from 35 on is a Hall of Fame career.
Yeah, I think through age 30, what did he have? It was under 50 wins, right?
Yeah, no, he wasn't. It wasn't anything special going on there. And I just looked at it as that, the idea that these guys now they have to really use all these old, these probably harmful methods to generate the velocity that they do. I mean, I'm pretty sure if Randy Johnson went out there right now, he could probably still hum it in there in the mid 80s, up to 90, probably just off of natural arm motion. But the thing is too, is I love the difference in Johnson is that now that he's retired, Randy Johnson, I think is just this happy-go-lucky stoner guy now.
He's a photographer.
He did not look anything. Yeah, that's right. He's actually an NFL
covered
photographer.
Some NFL games. Yes, exactly.
But I just love, actually, this is my favorite moment. The clip of him when he fucking threw at Kenny Lofton he got thrown out of that game, but he fucking said, he's like, if I wanted to fucking hit you, I would have fucking I would have thrown a fastball.
I love that.
He wasn't shy about the fact that, listen, if I wanted to fucking hurt you, I would have.
Nah, man, him joining the Yankees and not quite being in his prime anymore, hurt me. Cause I grew up partially in Washington, during his prime. So, I mean, I've always loved Randy Johnson. I've always thought of Jacob deGrom as kind of like a right-handed Randy Johnson.
Oh, yeah, I could see that with that tall, lanky, kind of effortlessly humming it in there. Velocity.
Two-pitch guy, fastball slider.
I mean, it's the idea, though, is that, I like listening to the folklore and the stories of things is that, any left-handed hitter, if they saw Randy Johnson was coming up, they were always back's kind of hurting a little bit. I'm not feeling it today, coach, kind of deal.
He was throwing a sweeper before they were calling it a sweeper too.
Well, I mean, I don't even engage in that one. There's a bunch of people that, are we inventing new pitches or are they just new name for pitches?
I mean, I've always had a problem. You look at Randy Johnson slider versus Clayton Kershaw slider. Clayton Kershaw slider is a bender, right? There's a lot of vertical drop on it. You looked at Randy Johnson slider, that thing was horizontal, going across the strike zone, like Chris Sales.
Well, I look at it with Kershaw. I've always just, it's funny that when I was a kid, I'm left-handed, and all the best pitchers in my area were left-handed, and I always just felt okay, I can't get a hit off them. I never understood why it was so hard, and it's because you can't see the ball. With Kershaw, his biggest thing is he's never the hardest of throwers or anything like that. It was all about the deception or not being able to pick up the ball. So when you combine the movement that he would get and how you're going to be seeing it so late, with Randy Johnson, it was, hey, here it comes. A
ton of velocity. When you got to prepare for 100 plus and 92 plus with break, it's tough. Look at what Spencer Strider does or DeGrom in his prime.
So I guess where I'm going with this is that who would you say is that guy in baseball right in the playoffs? Who is the starter that's in the postseason right now where we're saying, Skubal just had his first start and we don't know if he gets a second start. Not just going to just say I
think there's an obvious answer.
What is it?
I think it's Garrett Cole, right?
I want to.
He's the Hall of Famer.
He is. Now, this is, thankfully he's not facing the Red Sox, I guess I'll say.
Right. And he seems to be fully healthy.
that was a big, I don't know. I mean, that was, could have read too much in that. Curious your thoughts of the whole Devers thing when he intentionally walked him.
I think that's soft.
It's just, to me, it's just, if you're talking about, if that was in the 7th inning, I feel a little bit differently about it. But when you're up 1-0 in the 4th inning and you're saying, I don't want this guy to tie the game on us,
right.
that it just sends the emotion to, which, by the way, Devers hadn't hit a home run in like a fucking month. He went on the IR with 2 bad shoulders, like shortly after that.
I thought it was soft.
It's also, I mean, and again, I also kind of look at it as that's got to be, that had to be him relaying a message that he got from I can't imagine that a pitcher is voluntarily calling for that. I got to imagine that came from Boone, and I got to imagine that call didn't come from Boone.
I was about to say a spreadsheet made that decision. So,
well, did you see the fucking Brewers manager yesterday when they asked him about pulling Freddie Peralta? And he's like, well, he was only at this many pitches and he retired his last 9 guys. And he was like, is that right? And then he's looking through his notes and he's like, oh, well, one of them was a hard hit sack fly. Like, it's just like, no, I didn't know any of this. I was just receiving orders.
I mean, yeah, what's the classic example of that's like Blake Snell, right?
And this is actually
last year too, right?
But there is something that is a little bit of a killer about this, though, as I was thinking. Now, the Braves, this didn't come back to bite them or whatever, but I didn't mind at the time. On Monday during their game, I had bet Spencer Schwellenbach over 5.5 strikeouts. So when he only had 5 strikeouts through 7, and he was only at the pitch count that he had,
right?
I was kind of torn on this one because they had said he has never gone into the 8th inning of a game, but he was only at like 83 pitches or so. And I was like, they brought him out there, and then he has to battle through one batter, which is that guy's name Tyrone Taylor? Is he a white guy?
I don't want to rule definitively, but I believe he is mixed race.
Okay.
I think I've seen him before and he's not. I don't know.
I know it's just one of those weird things. It's just, it's not exactly, maybe because we characterized Tyrone as kind of being one of those like very tropey kind of names. I would say it's just not what you were expecting there. But I mean, that just also just kind of sums up how great, not just baseball, but playoff baseball can be. If you're up 3-0 in the 8th inning of a game, that's like being up 21-0 in halfway through the 4th quarter. You're not supposed to lose those games. Or the idea that this game is, the guy had an 0-2 count, literally hanging in the balance of this game almost being completely not mattering. Battles back through, fouls off a bunch of pitches, and then ends up roping a double. And now all of a sudden, this is a one more hit, and now all of a sudden it's 3-1, and we're a home run away from this being a tie game, which the game just took off from there.
Right.
But a guy like Schwellenbach, it's weird of that, the pitch count is there, but he did go into an inning he never went to. And then I never liked the idea because they pulled him right out of there after the first batter. I never liked the idea when you bring a pitcher out there that you don't intend on having him finish the inning.
You're not into that? You weren't a fan of the left-handed 1-out guy?
Oh, no, I don't. The lefty specialist is a different ball game. I'm talking about when you bring a pitcher out to start an inning, like he was the starting pitcher. And I mean, especially where it's like, okay, it was a righty and he was going to be facing, I get the idea there was 2 righties to start off that lineup or that half.
Are you a fan of the batter minimum, or do you think that's stupid?
I understand the idea of moving the game along, but I also don't like it because it's pretty obvious. I mean, like you can tell pretty quickly whether a guy has it or not. And the fact that he has to be exposed to 2 more batters, if we know he doesn't have it, is kind of can make a game take off on you.
Sure.
I'm kind of getting in the idea where I'm changing. I'm not as much of a hardo on the rules as I used to be. Like here I am. I'm somebody that I fought tooth and nail the universal DH and the pitch clock. And now it's like, I'm like, now that I go to more games, I'm like, wait, why was I
those things?
The universal DH, I mean, it is what it is. I mean, I did enjoy the strategy of it. It was not as big of a deal as everyone made it out to be. Like they made it seem like that every inning a pitcher was coming up and killing a rally. It maybe affected 2 at-bats a game. Wasn't the end all be all on there. If it does kind of
pitchers getting hurt on the bases either, with how hard it is to find good pitchers in the first place.
That's the portion I get of it now. I mean, ultimately, I remember it happened when Adam Wainwright went down and everyone was like, what do you think now? And I was like, well, a baseball player got hurt playing baseball. That's what I think was the way I took it. But the pitch clock was the one of that. As somebody who goes to games now where I'm trying to get these where I'm trying to, I was actually almost going to go to Baltimore today for the playoff game. I just didn't like if it was a 2:00 start, I would have done it because I tried to do it as a drive down and a drive back. I like the idea of knowing I went to 16 baseball games this year. I went to a game that had a rain delay that still didn't even last 3 hours.
That's awesome.
And that's
so much more fan friendly.
Well, and everyone, there was a part of it saying that too, is that, like we're getting less baseball. No, I'm not getting less baseball. I'm getting less bullshit.
Yeah, I'm all for it. I love it.
But where I was leading into this phrase though, is that a rule that I don't mind because all of these rules are put in place. Like I listened to an interview with Theo Epstein and he was like, hey, listen, he was like, I'm kind of responsible for ruining baseball with the way that I kind of started building teams and the way we started doing things. All these rules are doing is just bringing baseball's numbers back to where they were 20 years ago.
Right, which is,
and other thing where we've been going now is how do we protect pitchers, from thankfully people's arms stopped falling off somewhere halfway through the season. It seemed like that was just an early season thing, but John Smoltz has been out ahead of this. I mean, my own idiot brain when I was younger, when the arms started falling off like they were, or the elbow started popping off, was like going, maybe, and I use Justin Verlander as a classic example, is that maybe just because you can throw so hard does not mean that you should. With Verlander and his first act of being great was going, he was someone that was sitting like, 95 to 97 for most of the game. There would be that one big at bat in the seventh inning that he would reach back and hit 100. And that was kind of like the use in case of emergencies only type thing, Yeah. Sandy Koufax was famous for saying that he threw every pitch as hard as he could. Well, Sandy Koufax also had a very short career because of that, I believe.
I was about to say he ripped his arm apart.
Tim Lincecum, wonderful for while he was pitching, but I have to wonder if he didn't have to put as much strain on his body if we would have got a couple more years out of him. So
I don't think he would have burned as brightly though. I think that little body he's like squeezed every little drop out of it.
But where I'm going with this is my buddy's been telling me about this, and it's been proposed now. The 6-inning 100-pitch minimum for starting pitchers. I don't think it's the worst idea of that. Yeah, it sucks for guys out there, but
I don't think you could do the pitch count part. But I would be fine with a 5-inning minimum.
Well, no, 5 innings is what we're getting now. Where the idea is that what Smoltz was kind of going at is that we pay guys now for how hard they can throw. He's like, we used to get paid for how much we could pitch, and right. It's kind of like almost like I use the analogy of the post-World War I arms race where, hey, if nobody builds up the arms, then we won't go back to war again or whatever. And then
it's only the freaks who really get paid. It's the freaks who can do it for like whatever. What is it, like 6 years before you can be a free agent?
Who's
hitting the free agent market is like, they've already defied the odds, right? They've pitched in the majors for 6 years, which is insane.
Well, I'm curious to see what's going to happen with Paul Skeens.
Man, I hope he stays healthy. He's so good.
He is. And
I know it's tough being in his division, but man.
Oh no, I don't mind. The Cardinals aren't going to play competitive baseball anytime soon. We can touch on that, but
dude,
I look at it as though is that where I go is the other side of it is that I don't want him to waste away in Pittsburgh.
What if they're building something?
It would be nice to see. See, like there's some teams that they pick and choose when they spend. Pittsburgh never spends. Like
they got a cheap owner, a very cheap owner.
They're very, very cheap, and even when Pittsburgh, unfortunately, they picked the wrong time to have their window. During the McCutchen years, they had a 3-year stretch there where I think that they won 95 plus games. Unfortunately, that got them a playoff series against the Cardinals, which they lost. A 1-game playoff against Mad Bum and a 1-game playoff against Jake Arrieta. That's all they got out of that one.
When the Nationals drafted Strasburg, everyone kind of said the same thing. Like they'll never be good when he's good. He eventually won a World Series in Washington.
Right, but the Nationals also spent money.
Yeah, that's true.
They built and developed some talent.
They had calculated risks, right? Like they brought in Scherzer as their like big swing, and it turned out to be one of the great free agent signings ever.
Oh yeah, well,
but if he sucked,
God forbid the Cardinals ever made a strong play on a guy who was willing to give a hometown discount.
Right.
Oh, they're fucking. So this is. I'm just gonna ran quickly the Cardinalville. Their press conference the other day.
He's from Missouri, isn't he? He went to Missouri.
Yeah, he's a St. Louis. It's always one of those things. If that they always refer to somebody as local. Like I noticed this with even just being in New York State or whatever, where like when Syracuse had to play college basketball games in Albany, they're like, oh, they're playing right next door. I'm like, I think University of
Yeah,
Connecticut is
not
just as
quite.
close. Well, it's like University of Connecticut. I think it's just as close to Albany as Syracuse is.
Really?
It's not. It's like 2 hours away versus an hour and a half or something. Like, it's not like it very big.
Albany's far east. You're in. Where are you now? Still Troy, or you're in Colony, right?
Yeah, it's one of the best things. I have the biggest cheat code. I live right down the road from the airport here, which is what makes me traveling to as many ballparks as I did this summer feasible.
I forget Albany. You catch a lot of one ways, like directs.
No, because the way I do it is that I do a first thing in the morning flight. And then, usually you can't usually check into a hotel till about 3:00. Now, most of the time when I was arriving somewhere, like the further out I'm flying, I gain some time in the time zone. But most times you're flying out of Albany at 6:00. You're catching a quick turnaround flight, and then you're landing in whatever city at around noon or so. Pretty much every time I went to the hotel that I was staying at, I was like, hey, I have a room here. Can I leave my bag here? And they're like, no, you can just check in. So I kind of navigate the city that I'm going to for a little while before I go to the game. Then I go to the game, and then,
You ever rent a car, or are you just an Uber guy?
No, I didn't do any car rentals. I'll be honest. Usually my first stop when I get to a new city is a dispensary. So I'm not really trying to, I did a bunch of the driving trips, which, I have fun with that shit. I'm somebody that's weird enough that I'm fascinated driving over a bridge. Like the Delaware Memorial Bridge is kind of fascinating to me. Just this random structure that they built up here that allows degenerates like me to drive to their next destination.
You like a good bridge?
Except for the Golden Gate Bridge, I had a panic attack on the top of the Golden. I went to walk across the Golden Gate Bridge.
Oh man,
I'll just say that when you've maybe had a nice good wake and bake, and
you're high up there. I've been on the Golden Gate Bridge.
Well, here was the thing that freaked me out even more is that I was like, oh, it'll go right in the morning at sunrise, right when the fog's rolling in. I thought that it was almost to the point, and there's this thing I started reading about. There's this thing called the Call of the Void. I felt like this magnetic force, like trying to pull me over the railing almost, or I was like, just really like, it's one of those things where I'm like, I got to imagine falling off the Golden Gate Bridge is one of the worst ways to ever die. And you know what? For me, it was never a remote possibility until I was there at that moment. And I'm a little fearful of heights, but because of the fog, I felt like I was in the clouds and the sun beaming at me. You couldn't see anything. I literally was just like, I don't know. Like, I have no concept of how far off the ground I even am. It was actually absolutely terrifying, to say the least. But San Fran was one of my favorite cities to visit. I would never want to live there, but it is a beautiful city.
On average, over the last 20 years, 30 people per year jump off the Golden Gate Bridge.
Well, so that was the thing. I actually kind of I looked a little bit more onto that. They've actually spent a bunch of money. They now have, and it was kind of funny seeing this. They have a system to catch you now.
Yeah, they got a net.
Well, because it's basically chain link fence that's like 20 feet down. It's just enough to support your body weight, because anybody that has survived that they've talked to, they've all said the second that I jumped, I immediately regretted it. So the way that this guy was stating it is he was saying, he was like, whatever pain you think that you are feeling, when you hit that fence, you now know what real pain is, and maybe you'll reevaluate. It was kind of the way this guy was saying it. I don't know. San Fran was a bit of but San Fran and Oakland, which, by the way, it's part of the Oakland tragedy you can blame on San Francisco. There's really no reason that team was in Oakland and not in San Jose, other than the fact that San Fran said that they had rights to San Jose. Those two cities are 12 miles apart. They can't be any further from each other as far as demographics, aesthetics, culture.
There's a body of water between them too,
Right. But the fact is that, I took a 20-minute train ride, and I was went from one. This was the way I can sum it up from how different it is. The median income, or the median one-bedroom apartments, this is what I look up when I travel around. The median one-bedroom in San Fran is about $2,700 a month, while the median income is about $100,000. Oakland, the median one-bedroom is about $2,200, and the median income is about $45,000.
Yeah, it's like it's got to be a weird mix of people. It's like people who can't afford to live in like San Francisco. Dude, nobody can afford to live in San Francisco.
No,
I spent a little time in Oakland. One of my favorite Mexican restaurants on the planet, La Imperial in Hayward.
That's what I said. I said on a thread that, when people were saying goodbye to the Coliseum, I was like, the only reason I went to Oakland was to see the Coliseum. And someone brought up a good point. They're like, well, what's your reason to go to any of these other cities? And they listed them off. And I'm like, all right, I suppose you got a point there. But then someone's like, you didn't get the tacos? And I was like, look, I like to dip my toe in the water as somebody who like my new thrill seeking is kind of the urban exploration as I go on. I definitely wandered a little too far into Southside Chicago, as I must say.
Oh man, there's not a lot to see over there either.
It was one of those things of that it's just like,
scary, bro.
I started noticing that maybe when certain people that didn't look like me they stopped at the bus stop before the next block, I was like, yeah, that's maybe a good indicator not to go down there. When I was in Oakland, because if you take the BARTs, their public transportation system there, you basically walk through this chain link fence that's like almost reminds me of walking in through a prison yard, which I've posted onto this page here. But I just wanted to do a little just loop around the block just to see how it was like. There is a tension in the air. And I mean, I don't know again too, if Oakland, just the graffiti is just part of the aesthetic there, but it's just like, I was not really looking to go into a local business if I could help it. It didn't.
No, it's tough.
And even just in the stadium itself, it just kind of felt a little bit on edge. The best way I could describe the difference between the two ballparks in that area, Oracle Park, I was eating clam chowder out of a fresh sourdough roll. Oakland, I took a piss into a trough.
Oracle Park's beautiful.
It is. It's just an unbaseball like I was there about an hour or so before the game. It was Mexican Heritage Night, so there was like a whole mariachi band or whatever you would call that there. But the best way I would describe, and I was part of it too, but I'd say like 75% of the people I talked to at the ballpark were stoned. And just even like the ballpark smells, like you go to most ballparks, you're going to smell meats cooking and stuff like that. I went to San Francisco. I smelled chocolates. Like, it was just, it had more of a concert kind of vibe to it. And there happened to be a baseball game going there. I will say that it does suck. I was mostly sitting in the higher up level, which is great because you get a good view of the bay. I was down at the field level seating when Lamont Wade hit a splash shot, but you can't tell it's a splash shot when you're sitting at field level.
It's those fans bring it. Like during those playoff runs in the 2010s, man, that was a tough place to play.
Well, it's just such this weird atmosphere is that when I was in San Francisco,
has good fans. It's a different kind of atmosphere, very laid back, but I think all of their teams have a strong fan base.
Well, the way that I kind of looked at this though is that it's an interesting home field advantage is that during the day I'm walking around and it's 80 degrees and I'm looking at people wearing what I would call winter clothing and I'm like, what the fuck is this guy's problem? And then I found myself at a ball game 3 hours later shivering because it drops like 50 degrees and you got the wind coming off the bay. But
did you ever make it to Candlestick?
No, I never made it.
A long time ago. I went when I was like a little kid with my family, and it's like it was pretty much like out on like on like a peninsula, basically.
Well, and that was my
in the ocean.
Well, that was kind of one of my things for wanting to see Oakland is that that multi-purpose stadium, it's gone now.
What is Candlestick?
No, like the multi-purpose stadiums in general.
Oh yeah.
Like every city had them. Now they're just all gone.
Yeah, your like multi-purpose stadium now is like basically an NFL stadium you can host concerts in.
Right. Yeah, I mean, like being at Oakland, I was like looking out there, and I was just like, I'm trying to figure out: is this worse for watching a baseball game or a football game?
Ugh. I actually saw a game in Oakland once. It was opening day. I forget what year. I was there with my family. There was like 10,000 people there. And this was like at least. It was probably 20 years ago. And, like, even then, like, days were good. And it was like, this place is a shithole. And, like, I can't imagine it's gotten nicer since. So you went to the Coliseum this year?
Yeah, I went to the Coliseum this year. I saw it. I was in September, yeah. And but I will say Brent Rooker, who, by the way, is a very unknown great baseball player, they asked him about, and he just had the perfect answer. He's like, look, you come to Oakland, you come to see a baseball game. There's nothing else to see, like
shitty baseball game.
And I do like that a little bit. I mean, going through other the stadiums, I mean, I get it as far as to, for a casual baseball fan or for kids, like, I looked at like it was a different experience, but a park that I enjoyed a lot was American. It was Miller Park at one time. Now it's American Family Field or whatever.
That always looked cool in video games. It's got that big glass wall in the outfield.
if you walk in from the outfield for starters, it's basically like it was one of those things where I'm like, I hate that I'm almost pushing 40 because there's a lot of shit that looks really cool, but if you're above the age of 13, people might look at you a little weird for doing it. Like there was a
You
bunch
want
of
to
that
go
stuff.
down the slide?
Not the slide, but they just had like it was almost just like an amusement. Like it's weird because it's like half of it is an amusement park and the other half of it is a bar. There's like no real middle ground into it. I will say I thought hilarious because part of the things I've been noticing about doing my ballpark tour, I'm trying to note one. Only Fenway Park was the only park I was at that I had spicy mustard as an option for my hot dog.
There you
Two,
go.
it is amazing how in the Midwest, it seemed like it was exclusive to the Midwest where I could get non-alcoholic beers. Like on the East Coast, they don't even bother with, but in Milwaukee, non-alcoholic beer was actually less expensive than water. It's almost like they look at it as like tainted product or something over there.
Are you off the booze?
I haven't drank in over 2 years, man.
That's good. I pretty much don't drink anymore either. Like maybe 5 times a year, if that.
Well, I mean, you didn't quite have, we'll say, the struggles that I maybe had or the liking of it, which is funny is that you used to ask me, we used to do some prior engagements on, some other sports show. I remember one time you asked me, what is my second act going to be? This is my second act.
This is your second act?
My second act is I'm I don't drink anymore. I'm just a sales guy who just goes about his business. And I don't want to say I'm transitioning into a loner, but I'm starting to have more fun by myself than I do with other people.
I think sobriety is like cool in a way for like our generation that it wasn't for like prior generations.
Well, I look at it
I
as
know a lot of people who are sober and like,
Well, how much you're like what, a couple years younger than me?
I am 33.
33. Okay, so I'm 39, turning 40 next year.
Right.
I look at it as that the tipping point was my generation. I think that my generation ruined alcohol for everybody because I kind of look at the buildup of this because, as somebody who went through the ringer, through things or whatever, I remember, I got a DUI when I was 22 years old and I had to go to, and kind of speak on it. And I was kind of like, I remember being told by teachers, like, yeah, you're going to go to college and drink all the time. Like that was kind of like the expectation. If you look at the movies and the pop culture that was around at that period of time, like, this was kind of like not almost like I wouldn't even say enabled, but like it was like we were pushed in that direction, like kind of like, hey, this is what you're gonna do and it's okay, kind of thing. And then we kind of saw the fallout of that one. I really think that like this is the way I look at it is that beer wasn't enough for us. Once we started going to IPAs and beers that basically were turbocharged is when we started losing our ways.
Right.
But yeah, no, it's becoming more of a, and it's not the worst thing is that like I'm not one of those people that it's funny that now that I'm a sober guy or I don't drink, I mean, I still have my other, partakings, we'll just say. But it's funny to me is that when I tell people that, hey, I'm doing this now, it starts being weird that like people start kind of justifying why they still drink to me. And like, I'm never going to tell anybody you got to stop or whatever like that. But I'm kind of always like in the, hey, man, are you talking to me or talking to yourself right now? And I look at it as a classic example of that, Chris Carter, the NFL player, he was somebody who, early in his career was probably on the verge of throwing his career away or whatever. And somebody just said, hey, man, just try a week and see how it feels.
You saw that Dick Vermeil saved his life by cutting him.
Right. Like, I just look at it as that, like, as we're starting October and the sober October thing, I used to think that, hey, everything was okay because guess what? I can quit for the month of October and it's no big deal. But the problem was going that, hey, like when November 1st, you just go right back into a full out blackout. Maybe that's not good. If you didn't really accomplish anything out of this one. But I guess we'll go on to, we're going to end this one. The big thing we want to talk about is the people of vices. R.I.P. Pete Rose.
Yep.
I'm somebody who has been very critical of the man Pete Rose, but I will forever immortalize the player. You can make the distinction of the two of them. But I'm just getting tired of the whole. First off, I think it would be worse if you put him in the Hall of Fame now. But I don't think that it's just a trendy thing to say of that, like, oh, look at, this league sponsored by gambling. MLB is the only sport that has not had anybody mired in a gambling scandal since. Like it's that rule and that example, it does hold some merit.
Maybe adjacent to a gambling scandal, like your interpreter was mired in one.
All right. I haven't talked to you about that one. What do you believe about that one?
I don't know what to believe, man. Like the more I learn about Shohei Ohtani, the more it seems like he's kind of like a man child. So like I could theoretically believe that this person had access to their accounts and took advantage of them, which is funny because like Shohei Ohtani would be far from the first professional athlete to have someone near them take advantage of their finances. But like when it's like Warren Sapp or something, people are just like, oh man, what an idiot. But like when it was Shohei Ohtani, it was like, oh, how could he not know that was happening? Like,
dude, Dane Cook was robbed blind by his fucking brother.
Right.
Like, you know, like
especially if you're not financially literate. Like if you
right, and like
you don't know what you don't know.
Well, and it's like, again, like the whole thing where people are like, oh, well, he speaks English. He doesn't speak English well enough. Like, I truly believe that most players in Major League Baseball can hold a conversation in English, but they just don't want to have to talk to the media. And I don't fucking blame them.
I mean, dude, his English is probably better than my Japanese. Something else, like, even if MLB was running cover for him, I don't think the federal government would be. And they
right. I mean, like, where it's like, you know, when they go through and they're like, yeah, we got hundreds of thousands of text messages. Like, I mean, Shohei Ohtani would have to be as good as a scumbag as he is a fucking baseball player if he actually was doing everything that people think that he did. And it's just people I mean, the ESPN, who is just full of terrible reporting, they just ran with the story without knowing the whole facts of it. And we're in the culture where people just read the headlines, not the news. It's like, there's a 37-page double-spaced type document that took me about 20 minutes to read on the shitter. That if everybody read, I'm pretty sure that they would be like, okay, it seems like this guy was a scumbag. the Ippy Mizahara guy.
I'd agree.
That was my first thing that I said. I mean, like, it just seemed like conventional wisdom when the whole thing happened. Is like, I'm like, you can't. This guy's the gatekeeper of all conversations. Like. You're typing away there. And I mean, like, you know, like it doesn't make any sense too, as far as just the consistency with his character. Like when Ohtani was in Japan, he was making a ton of money. He was still living in a college dorm with his teammates asking for a meager allowance. Like, you know,
he's an adult child.
Like the idea that people are like, oh, well, he's such a problem gambler. That's why he took a deferred payment so he couldn't lose it. Are you out of your fucking mind? Like,
right. Yeah, they figured it out. They figured out what everyone else missed, I guess.
Right now.
What do you think of the playoffs? I wanted to get your prediction for some of these series.
So I mean, we're going a day behind. That's what I was trying to do before, but I had the Astros coming out of the AL.
They could still win 2 games in a row.
Right. I mean, that's the thing. They got through. Scooble was going to be tough. And I mean, they had opportunities to do what they were doing there. And I mean, I'm just in the natural thing with that. I never vilified the Astros as much as everybody else did. And now I especially don't, like, where it's like, okay, Bregman and Altuve are still there, but when somebody starts booing Yordan Alvarez, I'm like, you know how fucking stupid you are? He wasn't there. He was a 16-year-old kid in Cuba or whatever. Like,
the Astros weren't doing anything that everyone else wasn't doing.
Right. And like, you know, I kind of start wondering, you know, like, this is one of my favorites. I totally believe this theory out there, but have you seen this conspiracy theory in the NFL where they're kind of talking about, listen, Bountygate was just a way of punishing the Saints because they were really a fucking opioid fucking den?
Dude, when Junior Gillette left the Saints and went to the Redskins, he said that Sean Payton was a drug addict. And
so I remember this even when I was like,
shout out Junior Gillette.
Let's say that there was a little bit of a period of my time where I maybe used to not mind popping a pill. I got hit by a car when I was 22 years old, and they gave me a fucking giant script like this. Thankfully, I didn't end up on fucking oxys or anything like that. But
like I remember was a shitty year for you.
What's that?
I said 22 doesn't sound like it was a very good year for you.
No, 22 was an awful year for me. Yeah. So I remember like seeing a clip of him going on, and I'm just like, wow, he just looks kind of run down. And then there was a story that came out about some issues with there, but yeah, wouldn't shock me. I don't think we want to know how bad the drug problem in the NFL is, but that made sense to me. But I mean, I just kind of go on. I will always say this, if that, you know, Carlos Beltran, if I believe the stories that were reported out there, Carlos Beltran was the ringleader of the 2017 Astros cheating scandal.
Yes, 100%.
Has been debated. And I always looked at who were the two.
As a great sign stealer by people around him.
Who were the known, and again
known to have been good at stealing signs.
He was on the Yankees before, and I just always say Carlos Beltran was on the St. Louis Cardinals when Matt Adams hit one of the most improbable home runs ever off of Clayton Kershaw. Now, And Matt Adams is celebrating that home run the second he finishes his swing. People have ways of relaying signs there. By the way, that Cardinals team had like the most ridiculous batting average with runners in scoring position ever.
Mm-hmm.
I am not going to throw stones when I might live in a glass house, was always the way I took it with the Astros. But I do like the Astros going there because I think that the Yankees are a better team, but I think the Yankees kind of
the Yankees are good. I'm glad to hear that.
It's just when I feel like that when the Yankees see that jersey, like
no, not anymore, not this year.
I mean, we shall see. I mean, that's going to be that's really what baseball needs, and this is the funny thing of that. All these sports, everyone thinks are manipulated.
The fact we never 1-6 against us this year, buddy.
That's fine. I mean, with playoffs are a different beast. We'll see it. I mean, personally, I think that you guys don't want to see the Guardians. I think the Guardians are really a nightmare for you. And I will say this:
they're good. Cleveland's good.
Well, and I said this one is that when I was going my ballpark tour, I don't understand how Cleveland ever loses a home game in the playoffs. I was at a game where it was like maybe 2/3 filled, and I'm like, holy shit, this is a fucking rocking place. And Progressive Field, out of all,
Cleveland's got good fans.
Well, Progressive Field to me is, I mean, from considering that stadium is now old, it still is one of the best ones in baseball. I would say
the Jake.
The Jake. I mean, I have modernized myself enough. I mean, I still call where the Astros play Enron, but I have modernized myself enough to call the Astros Progressive Field now.
That's the juice box. As someone who lived in Houston, Minute Maid Field is the juice box.
It's the juice box. That's what they call it down there.
Minute Maid juices,
Yeah, I forgot you lived down in Houston to make it down there.
Yep.
My prediction there, I mean, I don't think that anybody in the Royals-Orioles series matters. I think that they're going to the Yankees are going to do away with them really easily. It's just, I mean, the Yankees, if the Yankees played in the AL Central, they would win 120 games, I think.
Yankees are 4-2 against the Indians this year, believe it or not.
And I like that you still had that. That's what I want them to play. I mean, that's the only reason I want them to play is because I still enjoy listening to baseball on the radio, and I want to listen to John Sterling have to every inning apologize for calling.
He's done. He retired.
He
came back for the playoffs. You're right.
Yeah, he's doing the playoff.
Yeah, you're right.
And here's the thing that's going on: of that, we take this for granted. That we used to only have so many broadcasts of sports, so we were spoiled with good announcers. Now that every game has a broadcast to it. Susie Waldman is suddenly a good announcer to me when I hear the two kids that they have.
I'm not a fan of the Yankees announcers. I've never really liked Sterling. I really don't like Michael Kay. I don't know. They're too opinionated.
But Susie Waldman is so much better than the young kids they have coming up. Or did you see that the girl that they had going in Oakland for a while?
Yeah, I see people hate her on social media. I think she's leaning into it a little bit too.
I mean that's what I and who knows? I mean, because guess what? We pay as much attention to the negatives, probably more attention to the negatives than we do the positives. It's just one of those. God, it didn't help out as much. But on the AL side of things, I think that I won't be shocked if the Royals beat the Orioles today.
I would like that very much.
For what reason? Just for the Yankees winning sake?
Because the Yankees play the winner of that series, I think. I mean, we were 5-2 against the Royals this year. We were 5-8 against the Orioles. One of the Orioles seasons was with the season pretty much over, but
you get the whole thing of that the Orioles build a team to have to try to beat the Yankees. I was almost so fucking spot on with my
built
AL.
A good fucking team.
I was almost so spot on with my AL East fucking analysis this year. My picks were I picked the Orioles to win under 90.5, which I believe that happened. I said the Yankees would win the division, but would win under 93.5. The Yankees won 94. I was fucking one game off on that one.
Yeah. The Orioles have earlier we were talking about teams with good players. The Orioles have some good players, man.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, well, I'll tell you that one of my favorite things about when you go to see baseball in person versus watching on TV, there will be some guys that jump out to you more. Like I remember when I was a kid, first time I went to Yankee Stadium and I saw Bernie Williams in person, I'm like, damn, he's a big motherfucker. Like he doesn't, you don't really get that from seeing him on TV. And Bernie Williams is, by the way, I think the most underrated player of the Yankees core four, or is he even considered part?
Yeah,
right. I don't think he's.
I think he's the fifth member of the core four. It's like a core five, really.
But I think that Bernie Williams, I mean, he was just as good as a hitter as Jeter was, really. He just didn't have the, I mean, center field is a little more demanding than shortstop, I would say. But I think Bernie Williams
50 something WAR and won
right,
like a million championships.
Right. I'm talking to a baseball addict like you. You know these things. If I was to mention to a casual fan that I think Bernie Williams is not too far removed from Derek Jeter, they would look at me like I'm crazy. But I think that's it's the Yankees on that half of it. I am very curious to see. I want it to be the Astros. I think the best thing for baseball, the best series that we could get would be if we had an Astros Yankees, and then if we had on the other side, we had the Phillies and the Dodgers. I think that those would be the best series. On the American League or the National League side thing, I think the Padres are the team to beat.
I mean, if they play like they did last night, absolutely. I think they have kind of an easy path too, because they played the Dodgers and like the Dodgers choke.
I just go to their pitching. I mean, here's the thing I love about the fucking Padres is that everybody on their team used to be a shortstop at one point, so they're all good athletes. And I like that they're guys who make contact. Like it's one of my favorite teams, and they won one World Series. If not for Madison Bumgarner, they would have won back-to-back. But the way that the Royals were built in that little run that they had in the mid-2010s, where, hey, let's have guys that can run the bases. Let's have guys that put the ball in play, because guess what? Shit happens. But yeah, I would say that, I mean, I'm looking for, I mean, that's where I bet, as you can see, I already got scrolling the bottom line here. I took the Astros at 9-1, and I took the Padres at 10-1, hoping I get one of them into the World Series.
Nice. I like that.
We'll see there. I mean,
same old Dodgers.
I just the Dodgers with the pitching. That's the biggest concern to me. I just don't trust the pitching on there.
They got Shohei.
I get all of that, but I just look at too is that him sitting. Now, here's going to be the wild card of all things. Does that motherfucker come out and pitch in the playoffs at some point?
I hope not. I don't want to see him get hurt.
I mean, but it would not shock me. I mean, that's the thing that goes on too, is that this season that he had is going to be, it's probably one of the most historic seasons ever. It's a one-off season. He's never going to do anything like this ever again. People that, wanted to, everyone, this is what everyone likes to do now. Somebody accomplishes something. Season. Somebody accomplishes something now. The immediate thing to do is to shit on it. And I look at it as that, yes, he did have some advantages in the way he built the season, but I also look at it as that he took advantage of the opportunity that was in front of him.
I mean, this dude is a historic player and athlete, right?
But where I go on is that I think he actually might be a better pitcher than he is a hitter.
Yeah, I mean, he doesn't have much longevity as a pitcher.
Because
20 innings of dominating.
But where I kind of look at is that this idea, I think the end scenario for him, or the ultimate role, they'll do a year of him as a starter on there. I truly think he's going to make it a point to win a Cy Young. I think that he's literally just got this checklist of
that's what's next.
That's like, what's the mission accomplished on there? I could see at some point in the middle to later part of his 30s, he's this like power reliever.
He could be the first person to win the triple crown of the Hank Aaron Award, the Cy Young Award, and the MVP. The Hank Aaron Award is like the Cy Young for hitters, allegedly.
Which is the Hank? I mean, well, the award
nobody talks about.
You know what? One of the hardest ones to figure out is if you ever play the Immaculate Grid is Silver Sluggers. Like I don't know exactly what constitutes the Silver Slugger.
Right.
But
whatever people want, basically.
But well, I guess so finish this one off. We'll talk. We're coming up on an hour here. That's about how long I like to run these. Pete Rose. I mean, I guess what's your memory of him, or what do you think going forward is the play for him, or do you think he belongs in the Hall?
I mean, I think his accomplishments would put him as a Hall of Famer. I mean, I would rather see like Joe Jackson go into the Hall first, because like Joe Jackson, there's evidence that maybe he wasn't involved in that series fixing scandal. I mean,
there's also evidence that he was though too, like maybe his own testimony.
Right. But there's no evidence that Pete Rose wasn't involved in gambling.
Well, the thing is that goes on me
is that you just got to keep them all out.
Well, I look at it this way: is that I mean, I almost go that the Pete Rose story is fucking a biblical story at this point. I look at it as that a man, I don't look, if you watch his record-breaking hits and that 9-minute standing ovation that he got in Cincinnati, I don't think a player has ever ruled or owned a city the way that that man did on that day. It's crazy to think now.
Maybe David Ortiz post-marathon bombing.
It's still, I mean, like a 9-minute long standing ovation. I mean, like, you know, there's he died there, but like the fact that Pete Rose was a hometown kid and had that whole career up there, that was 24 seasons or whatever, all culminating into one right there. It's just kind of going on. Is that, I mean, and even right now when people are still saying, oh, he should be in, I just watched the interview of Johnny Bench that he was on the Dan Patrick Show, when his own teammate and friend will still say he doesn't belong in, and says that, hey, we did all of these things to try to get him back in and he wouldn't cooperate. That's the problem I have, where even, you know, he deflects the blame on everything. It just became like, you know, if we look at even the steroid guys, Jason Giambi didn't even apologize or admit to what, or he didn't even admit to what he did. He just apologized for it. And he was instantly forgiven.
I'm mad that he apologized.
But he didn't as much as he did. But I mean, it's just kind of like, we are a forgiving society, but it's the idea that, you know, the lying and the fact of that it goes much worse. And Dan Patrick himself has said that. He even said this before when the documentary was released. After he passes, there's going to be some stuff that's going to come out that's going to make everybody feel a little better about him never getting in.
Right. When he was living with a steroid dealer.
That's always the one I just kind of go on, is that with the idea going, oh, we got guys with steroids and so the other thing. So you mean to tell me that a guy who was the most uber competitive possible, that would do anything to win, just hung out at a gym with a bunch of steroid dealers and just looked the other way the entire time? I'm supposed to believe that? Is that true? Also hung out with a bunch of guys who were trafficking cocaine and he just never, you know, never got down on that one. I find that weird.
Yeah, people like to talk about Barry Bonds doing steroids. They don't want to talk about Willie Mays doing amphetamine. So, you know. I
mean, the amphetamine one, I mean, that's the idea that, you know, these guys, I mean, like, I think it was Bob Gibson was one of my favorite. He just said, I'm really glad I didn't have the choice to make, because I probably would have taken him. Like,
yeah. I think a lot of these guys would. How could you not?
And I mean, here's the thing that goes on is that when people say, how can you tell the story of baseball? Pete Rose is still in the Hall of Fame as far as everything he did. His career is still somewhat reflected there. It's just that his bust is not in there. But
I mean, you can tell the story of baseball. You could say the person who has the most hits in the history of the MLB is not in this Hall of Fame because they gambled on baseball. There you go.
But here's the other thing I kind of go on too, is that it is a museum for the fans, but the members are members of a fraternity. And when your members take everyone forgets this. They took a unanimous vote that if Pete Rose was inducted, they would not show up. That was a unanimous vote by the people in the Hall of Fame. So we're going to tell people that are part of a fraternity how to run their fraternity. If I'm understanding that correctly.
Right. I don't really think he meant that he was sorry. I think he was
sorry that he got caught
in the Hall of Fame. Right. He's sorry that he's not in the Hall of Fame. He's sorry that that's his legacy. But like,
well, even in his most recent one, he didn't even say something about this. About he was like the most recent clip of him talking about it. He said, "It cost me $200 million," which is a fucking gross estimate. You know, this idea that he would have made $6 million. Like the idea that he would have kept managing, you know, is, you know, we don't know. But this team did what
manager. He kept playing himself as a manager.
Well, that's the other thing too, of that, again, going on with this one, the hits record. I mean, if we want to talk about a stat pad, I mean, I was shocked at this. He doesn't even have a career OPS of 800. And I don't want to say that I'm going to suddenly I'm not going to do the thing where we re-legislate people's careers. I mean, I do have the idea of that if I need to get a guy that's going to put a bat on a ball, I'm probably going to want Pete Rose out there. If I want a guy to give me 100% efforts, I want Pete Rose out there. But, yeah, it wasn't like he was this, I don't know. He was an icon, that's for sure. But I think that we looked at baseball a little bit differently then. But I mean, the corked bat accusations in Montreal, they're pretty damning. Like,
right.
The guy that went through all that thing, you know, and
again,
he's not a good liar. Records. That's the whole thing when he does these interviews and he lies. He's not a good liar. And for anybody that's ever read the Dowd reports, that's probably one of the worst things ever, is watching him get manhandled by an investigator, or reading about it, where he's got an answer for everything. I think my favorite was that they said they gave him a check that he cashed at a racetrack where he allegedly didn't, when he was evading his taxes. And they had him write his signature out, and he wrote it oversized intentionally. And the guy was like, Pete, thanks a lot. You just made my job easier to verify that that's actually your signature. Was this not a very good liar, I guess I would say. Really
the whole thing struck me as an intelligent person.
Well, the thing is that it's just that, and this is the sad part of it, is why I say there's the biblical story of that. I look at that, the gambling on baseball was the apple in the Garden of Eden. Like, you have it all, my friend. The only way you can blow it is this thing. And he did it. And even, I don't think people quite realize that he was given a way out. He even still says, if you watch the original covers there, he's still saying that, there's nothing in here that says I ever bet on baseball, even though they did say he bet on baseball. I mean, I would love to see you have a mountain of evidence against you and just sit there to deny it. I wish I knew what that was like. And that's, the cover up is usually worse than the crime. But right. with the Bonds thing that gets scary is, when Hank Aaron or when Willie Mays passed away, they were asking, who was the greatest living player now? And I'm like, I don't know if the answer was even Willie Mays when he was alive. I mean, the saddest part about the Barry Bonds thing is that I think that he was the best athlete we ever watched, or the level of dominance at which he had. It was just like, I can't, it's indescribable. It would be like if the end of his career would be like if a running back only got 30 carries a season and had 20 touchdowns.
I think Bonds has been the greatest living baseball player since he retired.
Because you look at this, if it wasn't for Bonds doing that one, how many more MVPs does Albert Pujols have? Like,
a few.
But no, Bonds, that's the steroids one I can forgive a little bit more, because here's the thing. That all happened when I was a kid, and that was when we all went to ESPN for everything, and ESPN just force-fed it down our throats. Steroids are bad, steroids are bad, steroids are bad. I don't want to say that they were good, steroid test, but they're so much more rampant than we want to admit. The idea that people MLB just wanted to believe that steroids started with Jose Canseco.
Right.
And I know, what's that?
Barry Bonds never failed a steroid test, so I don't know where this idea that he took steroids comes from.
Look, you can, if you want to play that game, sure, but
I'm just saying. David Ortiz is in the Mitchell report. He's in the Hall of Fame.
I never understood that one, but I guess
I do. It's because people like David Ortiz.
Oh yeah, I get that portion of it, and that does become. Baseball writers are, I will say, some of the most petty, awful people. And yes, their feelings got hurt by Barry Bonds. Barry Bonds was a bit of an asshole. But and this has actually come up, and I'll even kind of pass this off of that. The way that's kind of passed this to the NFL with when the Tom Brady Baker Mayfield thing. And I thought about this one. I don't know how many sports you played like that, but if you ever played on a team, I'll always say usually the best player on the team is the hardest guy to play with.
Yeah, when I played football in high school, our quarterback was an easy guy to get along with, and he ended up playing D1 football. But yeah, for the most part, I think a star athlete can certainly get their ego inflated.
Well, it's one of those things. It's kind of
relentless, especially at the pro level, right? It's guys who are maniacally competitive.
It almost happens to be the way I kind of theorize it is kind of how good players don't necessarily become good coaches. Is just that you can't understand that people can't do or understand things the way that you do is what I look at it as.
Right. I don't think Kobe Bryant was an easy person to play with.
Right. The expectations of standards for winning are that was the thing. Tom Brady, he definitely threw some great shade at that one. But again, Barry Bonds, it's got to be difficult for him to, relate to somebody else as much. Or when you're just that good. And in his case, born a little bit into baseball privilege. I couldn't believe this one of somebody asked me, there was a trivia question for the players. There was 4 players who had at least 5 2020 seasons. Uh-huh. I didn't realize his father was one of them, and I never would have guessed it in a million years.
Bobby Bonds is a great player.
Yeah, no, but it's one of those kind of I guess, when you're so good that we forget about you because your son, or your son was so good we forget about you.
I mean, the man is Willie Mays' godson.
Yes, but I don't know. I just it's one of those things of that I think that there's this it's one of the great tragedies of sports. At least it's kind of over with, but I think it's a lazy take of that everyone thinks now because I mean, I don't get me wrong. I'm somebody, this is a weird thing about me. I am somebody who has smoked pot and has gambled most of my fucking adolescent life to adult life. I'm not a fan of either of them being legalized, by the way.
Oh man, I'm a FanDuel guy. Like, I love their app, but like, don't you miss having a bookie?
I miss that when I was having a gambling conversation yes, I missed the bookies for the reason that meant if you bet on sports, you weren't just a fucking idiot. Like, you actually had to be somewhat savvy to this one. Like, I sit there and I just cry or I laugh at all the people. Like, my new favorite one is whenever a player gets hurt. Like on Monday night when Will Levis got benched or got injured for the game, and there was people calling for voids on his props. And I'm going, look, if you're betting a Will Levis over, you got some fucking you gotta look yourself in the mirror on that one. You can't ask for FanDuel to bail you out on that one.
Talk about newbie gamblers too. If they start the game, the bet's cash.
Well, here's the other thing too. I mean, I look at it as that, I've been doing this new thing with the NFL. Here's a little gambling advice for you. The NFL is so awful. I don't believe in picking winners anymore. You want to know the way I've been betting the NFL? And it's been working too. No, not even player props. Everybody talks about how the games are fixed and they're all close. Well, there's a way you can capitalize on that one. If you go through and look through the scores on this one. There's a prop you can do on every game, team winning margin. If you bet both teams to win by 1 to 6 points, just sit back and collect your money.
Everything.
You don't parlay it. You just literally every game. This is what I do. I go through every game and I take each side to win by 1 to 6 points. And if about
I need to parlay things.
If about a third of the teams actually, a third of the games end in a 1 to 6 margin, I make money. So I would never in a million years have picked the Broncos to fucking beat a game against the Jets, but the Broncos winning by 1 to 6 points, that paid plus 650. I mean, if you looked at all those, and the idea of it being is that when I'm playing that 1 to 6 time, I'm on the opposite side of every fucking degenerate crybaby out there, because when the team doesn't score the touchdown to go up by 2 scores, that means I won. If the team scores the meaningless backdoor touchdown, that means I won. Where everyone else is crying fixed, and it's like, well, if only there was a way to profit off this shit, because I'm telling you, if you're watching on here, picking against the spread, I'm normally like a 55% picker. I'm at 40% this year. I mean, small sample size, but for such a garbage product that's out there. I mean, and that's the one thing I can say about baseball, especially as you go to the playoffs. Baseball is the only sport that I think is improving its product right now.
Yeah. Who do you like in the NFL? You think anyone's good?
I don't even think that there's no reward in me making a statement right now in week 4. Like what I'm really unfortunately facing is that I'm ready to lose a bunch of money on the Chiefs in the playoffs because they weren't good all season and then they just turn it on in the playoffs. I mean, that's
the hallmark of a great team. They're winning games with their C games.
The thing is that, I mean, at the end of the day, I'm not talking any shit about the Chiefs, but it's just that this is clearly the worst team that they've had of their successful reign. And they're still 4-0. The Ravens, if they don't blow that game against the Raiders, I think we're talking about the Ravens being a little better than they are. I think that the NFC is complete garbage. I don't think that there's a good, we're the Lions are probably the best team. I mean, the idea that, everyone talking right now about, because this was an internet debate I got into. I was saying about Trevor Lawrence. I'm like, if you're this far along in your career and we're asking whether or not you're good or not, it means we know you're not good. And everyone immediately replied to me with Sam Darnold. And I'm like, hey, I've got how many years of Sam Darnold looking one way, and I've got 4 games of Sam Darnold looking another way. I'm not saying he can't be great, but
coaching matters.
It does help and it does matter. But I always think back to Matt Ryan's a classic example of this one. Matt Ryan had that one MVP season, and everyone's like, yep, see, this is the guy he was always supposed to be. And then he went back to being the other guy after that. And I'm like, it's funny. I want to see you be good for more than 1 year, or in this case with Sam Darnold, 4 games.
That was Matt Ryan's 1 season with Kyle Shanahan, wasn't it?
Right. No, and coaching does play a huge role in this. I'm never going to dispute that one. But I just look at it where it's like, all these next best quarterbacks, when I look at that, wow, Matthew Stafford can still fucking move the ball with no offensive line and no wide receivers. There's something to that. I laugh about where we've gone with the quarterback position in the NFL. The analytics movements in football that realize it's way more efficient to pass the ball than it is to throw the ball. But then the idiots then go and they draft running quarterbacks.
Have you watched Jaden Daniels play this year?
Jaden Daniels
he's a monster, bro.
I hate that I'm being that guy, but I'm just like going, I just hope he doesn't get hurt.
Right. I mean, I hope that for all these guys. I hope that for Josh Allen.
But I mean, this is the idea of that. I mean, like, and I'll be the first to admit, I didn't think he was, that guy coming out. I mean, he did what he did in the SEC with a great talented roster around him. But, it's funny how we can make the excuses for other quarterbacks about, oh, you're not in an ideal situation, yada, yada, yada. The Commanders are picked as one of the worst situations to be in, and he's flourishing in it. And actually, I think now we're going to appreciate is that Terry McLaurin is one of the best wide receivers in the NFL. He just doesn't have a quarterback.
Total stud. Having a good quarterback there also changes the situation, right?
I lost you there, bud.
Having a good quarterback there changes the situation, right?
Oh yeah, well but I mean, he does. This is the way I look at it, and this is how I watch certain games. And this was the conclusion I drew when I was watching the Ravens and the Bills the other day. Sometimes you're watching a team, and it doesn't look like it's fair that they get multiple downs to get a first down. With Jaden Daniels, it doesn't seem fair that they get 3 plays to get 10 yards.
Right, when he's completing 80% of his passes, which that won't hold up, but he knows where to go with the football, it seems.
And I mean, again, a lot of it, I mean, don't get me wrong, completion percentages are a little bit overrated because nobody is actually kind of the same thing with what we were talking about with baseball, where we got to get pitchers being not scared to give up a run here and there.
Right.
I think that because now everything, if you throw an interception, it's a viral clip that's on the internet, or, oh my God, what's wrong with that one? Even though most people don't understand what the play call was and how a receiver may have run a wrong route on there. Aaron Rodgers strikes me as a guy who's very guilty of this one, of that I'm just not even going to take a chance. And I wish that, it would open up the game a little. I mean, it would open up the game a little more if people did take a little more chance. I mean, 80% completion percentages aren't. I mean, Jaden Daniels is a little bit exception to this one, but I've seen some quarterbacks who have some great completion percentages. It's like, yeah, but when it's 3rd and 12 and you're throwing the ball 10 yards short of the first down, I don't look at that as a completion necessarily.
That feels very, very targeted at Derek Carr.
It's the old Alex Smith was really the poster child for it.
Okay, yeah, Alex Smith too. Derek Carr notably.
But Derek Carr is that, crazy. If we sell out to stop Kamara and we ask Derek Carr to beat us, suddenly doesn't look as great.
Right. Derek Carr is not a bad quarterback.
Derek Carr, no, he's not. I mean, he's
fine.
Here's the thing: is that Derek Carr is one of those guys that I'll make this compliment about him. He plays well enough to put himself into situations to fail.
Yeah.
Like if he was really terrible, then he would never have a chance to have his blunders. He plays good enough to put himself in a position to fail, though.
Oh yeah, for sure.
But and who knows? I mean, it's crazy to think that, again, he was at one point in time, he was a front runner for an MVP. Carson Wentz was at one point in time a front runner for an MVP, and they're just gone. But as I kind of look at it as the example of how much we've devolved in this one, is that Joe Flacco can still come off the bench and be a top 10 quarterback in the NFL.
Isn't that nuts?
Brady, if Brady still wanted to play, I don't know how well he does for a full season, but Brady would come out there this. The idea of that, I just look at where if a quarterback knows where they're going to go with the ball, it's one thing where it's just different levels of dangerous. Where I look at this again as the gambler, and my intangible way of measuring quarterbacks is how do I feel having money against them. With Mahomes, it's a little different because he's going to pull the Houdini and find a way out of there. There was nothing more demoralizing than betting against Peyton Manning and just watching that guy take a 3-step drop and just hit a guy where the defense is always just a tick late. There's nothing we can do this guy is always going to find that soft spot and hit it immediately.
See, I'm not really a Peyton Manning guy, but I understand what you're saying.
I'm not a huge, as far as on the historical, legacy of things, but the idea of that, watch a guy like him. I say this right now, if you dropped prime Tony Romo into today's NFL, he'd probably be the best quarterback in the league.
Do you think he'd be better than Patrick?
Yeah, I do. I think what everything that Mahomes does, that Romo did. Like, I don't
Besides
even
winning the playoffs.
That's where it goes. But then where we go there, we're going to go with the coach. Now, if fucking Tony Romo had Andy Reid as his coach, do you not think that maybe he has a couple of pieces of hardware?
I think we've kind of had a revisionist history of Andy Reid post Mahomes, because prior to Mahomes, he was that guy who ran the 8-minute drill with Donovan McNabb at the end of the Super Bowl, right? And he's the guy who got fired.
Right. I mean, like, well, it's like, here's the thing is I've matured and grown older, is that we if a coach does one thing wrong, we go on as that, oh, he's not a good coach. And it's like, we don't talk about everything that they do right.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, Andy Reid is a good coach, but
well, just look at this
Romo's
one.
Coach Jason Garrett.
Find me every quarterback that has played for Andy Reid. Compare their numbers playing for Andy Reid versus not playing with Andy Reid. It answers a lot of questions for you.
Yeah, what's that? Like Alex Smith and Donovan McNabb, basically.
Michael Vick.
Yeah, Michael Vick.
Alex
Vick
Smith
was all right that for a couple of years.
Right, but Michael Vick was was revolutionizing. I mean, Vick, until he got hurt, I mean, he was gonna be an MVP one year.
Yeah,
with them. I mean, it's just, he's the quarterback whisperer.
He's definitely a good offensive coach. I mean, I'm not saying Andy Reid's a bad coach.
Well, I would look at this schematically as, like, one of the things I always laugh about is that, to give you an idea how good he is as his play calls, it's pretty obvious that Travis Kelce has always been Patrick Mahomes' go-to target. He's open on every play. That's not because Kelce's this tremendous athlete and tremendous route runner or anything like that. He is schemed open.
Yeah, for sure.
And we'll see there. But I mean, this will be the most impressive of if the Chiefs do win it. I mean, I'm laughing about, this is a funny one. They're laughing about, they're gonna trade for Tyreek Hill again. It's hilarious to me watching Tyreek Hill have his tantrum on the sidelines, and we're just gonna forget about the way he acted with the police officer a couple weeks ago. Like, are we sure this guy maybe doesn't escalate situations a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, that cop was being kind of a scumbag too, but yeah.
Right. No, I mean, there was that was the thing about that. Can both people be wrong in this situation?
It's like those cops who harassed Scotty Scheffler. I don't know. This certainly isn't the forum for me to start railing against cops, but
no. I don't. I'm not bad. I just kind of look at it as that, it is something of that. I'm curious what the relationship that Hill even left with that team. I mean, but it is funny seeing Mike McDaniel have to be a leader of men all of a sudden, and how horribly that's going.
He's not looking like such a genius, is he?
No. So I'll tell you right now, the best person to follow, one of my favorite watches I do. Did you ever watch Last Chance U?
On Netflix? I know it is. I didn't watch it.
So if you do watch it, there's seasons 3 and seasons 4. There's this guy, Coach Jason Brown. I watch him every fucking morning. He's a white guy from Compton that was actually, he was when he was a senior in high school, he was one of the top 4 quarterbacks as far as All-Americans with Peyton Manning. Didn't really amount there. But he has a show that I watch all the time, and he really he's been nailing this one for a while. I forget what I was even mentioning about that. Or I mean, with I don't know. I just drew a blank there. I've probably been talking for a little bit too long, and my coffee's getting empty. Bill, it was a pleasure chatting with you on all this stuff. We can just rant and rave about baseball constantly, which is why you're still around. I mean, like, you're still one of the few people I chat with you more than people that I actually like hung out with on the regular, and it's because of baseball. And it's like I do have these go-to people that's, like if you're a good baseball fan, like, don't you kind of feel like that the people that that follow the sport that you love, you still stay in touch with because there's only so many of us?
Yeah, especially with baseball. It's like I got like 4 baseball friends,
Well, because there's different levels of baseball fan. There's the I follow my team. There's, the fair weather, like, people that just start watching, and that's fine. I always laugh about where it's people's reasons for not liking baseball. It's like, look, you can just say that you don't like it. Just don't give me bullshit reasons. And when people say there's too many games, I'm just like, why is that a reason to not watch?
Right.
If they cut the season down to 120 games, you're like, okay, I'm invested right now. Like, okay, like dude, there's 162 games, and even on a good when the Cardinals are good, I probably only watch like half the games, but I do follow the scores. I get alerts every time there's a run scored in their games or whatever.
Right.
But I think that everything that people say about why they don't watch baseball, I can just double it down with football as far as it's just not. I tried doing a live stream the other day, watching the Giants and the Cowboys, because I had money on that game and I was struggling to not fall asleep. And I was like, okay, maybe I'll just kind of do like a little bit of a live stream and commentary on this one. I couldn't even come up with anything to talk about because it's 2 minutes between action. Like, it's like if every time we saw a big play in baseball, like, okay, we do have like, there's the challenges in baseball, but even we know they're not going to get overturned. A coach is just burning their challenge for the sake of burning their challenge in some cases. But like, it's just like if every home run we had to hold our breath and say, was that really a home run? Was there a flag on that? It's so awful. And the
other stuff in baseball gets done quicker. Like in the NFL, there's a lot of standing around. In baseball, like the quiet outs where nobody gets on base, they mow right through those. Like how long's an at bat last? 2 minutes?
No, I mean because the guys get after it a couple pit. I mean, you'd only have so much of that where baseball has found that good medium of that. A lot of the times, the problem is that it's a product that's meant for it's attended in person, but it's meant for TV. And you get some like, have you been to a football game recently? It's fucking awful.
Yeah, I don't like going to the games, especially not Bills games, man. Everyone's so fucking drunk. It's not a very nice stadium. It's the shithole parking lot.
I remember us talking about this, like when I was living in Western New York, and like the idea of I'd be partying and stuff like that, and people would need to make sure that they had Coke left over for the Bills game. It's like, really?
Yep.
Or in many cases, people just stayed up doing Coke and drinking from Saturday night to go to the Bills game. And, I went to 14 different ballparks this year, and I was wearing Cardinals gear in all of them, and a lot of them Cardinals gears went there. I may be probably the most, someone might throw a half, nobody was really ever had any vitriol for me. There was one Mets fan that really seemed to have a real problem with me wearing Cardinal stuff at a game. And I just said to him, dude, and I was like, show me where the logo touched you. And his buddy started laughing and kind of diffused the situation. But, like, for the most part, I'd have a Cubs fan, say something like that. And, like, the best part is when people go to say to me, oh, Cardinals suck this year. I'm like, yeah, they do. Like, it's just plain and simple. They do.
I got to be honest. I'm so not wired that way. Like, I couldn't imagine seeing someone wearing, like, the other team's shit and being like, oh, fuck you, dude. Like, you're an asshole. Like, dude, just, like, those people are idiots.
Right. Like, and I mean, like,
I see someone wearing that. It's like, oh, they're a Cardinals fan.
Right. Like, I mean, it's like, well, I guess like I made the mistake the one time when I went to the Dodgers and the Mets. I got stoned in the parking lot and I was wearing a bright red Cardinals quarter zip. That as I was walking in, I'm like, I probably should have taken this off. I'm in a Dodgers Mets game.
I love people who do that. They wear like a jersey or something from a team that's not playing.
Well,
it's just like they're at a baseball game. This is their baseball thing. I love it.
Well, I'm okay with the hat or like that. Now, I would tell you, don't do that in Philly. So I was wearing a Cardinals hat in Philly, and I was sitting in the 300 level, and I was sitting next to some like straight out of It's Always Sunny Philadelphia guys, and I was kind of like, oh shit, I wonder if they're gonna mention anything to me at some point, or like I'm kind of picking up. They have a weird vibe to them. I'm like, all right, how do I do this? I see some guy wearing a Pete Alonso jersey, a couple rows ahead of us, and I was like, I got this. So I turn around to them and I'm like, hey guys, I'm like, I'm not the smartest guy wearing this hat right here, but at least I'm not that fucking idiot right down there. And they're like, yeah, see, he gets it or whatever like that. And then they kind of wanted to talk shit about the Cardinals a little bit. This was after I had just gotten done. The 2024 White Sox are the worst baseball team in the history of baseball. I went to St. Louis and watched them lose a series in Busch Stadium to that team. So I started telling them about that. And these guys, like, it was almost like the episode of Seinfeld where Costanza starts speaking his case to the Andrea Doria survivors. Like, these guys actually felt bad for me by the end of the time I was talking. Like, they actually, looked like they wanted to give me a hug. And that's Philly fans. But they were saying that, like, they were talking about if this guy, turns around and looks at us one more time, we're going to kick his ass. So Philly would be the only one I would say it for. But every other stadium, it would basically be like, I got a little attitude from an usher in Milwaukee which, because I was wearing a Carlin was right shirt and a Cardinals hat. And most times I had to show, at most stadiums I went to, when you go to your seat, you had to show your ticket to the voucher to the guy. And this guy was like, when I go to walk into the second time to go to my seats, I was like going to show my ticket. He's like, I remember you. And I was like, the Carlin shirt, right? And he just kind of gave me the really dirty look. So at the end of the game, to even piss him off even further, I went up to him, shook his hand. I was like, thank you so much. Tremendous time at your ballpark. I loved it here. You guys have a wonderful, wonderful operation here, class operation. And he just gave me this look like, I want to fucking punch you in the face so bad, you Cardinals fan. But no violence whatsoever. You go to a football game, it really is. I mean, I went to one Monday Night Football game. Went to one Bills game my entire life, the Bills-Browns game. We got into a fight in the parking lot. What's that?
I was at that game in high school and almost got in a fight in the parking lot.
We got in a fight in the parking lot because somebody fucking threw a bottle at me because I was wearing a pea coat. I heard nice pea coat, you certain F word that we can't say anymore. And they and I felt a bottle whizzing past my head. Unfortunately for them, they did not realize I was with a guy who was the size of Sean Merriman at the time. So we got the last laugh on that one. But, it's just it's just a bad environment. And just in general, football fans, I just find are, we're baseball fans. We can have some pleasant conversations. We might disagree here and there. Football fans, I can't think of people that are more passionate about something that they know less about.
Oh, yeah, they're idiots. There's a lot to the game of football, too.
No, and that's where I was going when I mentioned the Coach JB thing. When I actually watch an actual coach break down tape and actually start going into some of the intricacies of the game, nobody understands it. But the thing is, there's fans that like to use the lingo. Like when I hear a fan saying, "Oh, they're lined up in 12 personnel," I'm like, why? I'm like, why do you're just doing this to sound smart? You're a fucking idiot.
Right. I've always called 12 ace. That's how I learned 12 personnel.
I just, how about this one? Single back. Like, or whatever, 2 tight ends. Like, what's the worst of calling it?
Right.
But anyways, Bill, pleasure having you on here. Pleasure chatting with you. We got some people that were in and out of here, but mostly people watch these on the replay on that one. I'll let AI get us a couple shorts out of here. Nobody saw you out here, but it's wild to think that, you're like this actual professional now. Like people look to you for guidance. It's wild. It's our turn to run this world in this generation.
It's a continued evolution, right?
Yeah, it's just try and get better every day. That's all we can do, buddy. It was a pleasure having you on there, and I'll if you're around in the day, I'm sure we'll be exchanging some chats, throughout the baseball. Who do we got going on the Astros Tigers game today? Actually, I'm actually gonna look at that.
I'll tell you, it's not Verlander and Flaherty. How about Verlander getting left off the roster?
I mean, Hunter Brown is who's going for the Astros today. I don't hate that one.
That should be a win. He's good.
Yeah, because I don't even know much about this Holton guy from the Tigers. I mean, admittedly, I'm not.
He was pretty good this year, like a 2-something ERA. We got Liverpool playing at 3 in the Champions League.
Oh yeah, dude, I love soccer now. I'm a fucking soccer. Really? It fits well because with my work schedule, like my football weekend is actually, I love waking up. I wake up early in the morning. So when I wake up and there's already soccer going on, I love the way that soccer is time structured. I've really changed my tune on things. I don't hate a sport that has ties in it all of a sudden. Because you know what?
No, I like the tie.
Well, I like the idea I wish that American sports adapted this method a little bit more of that, hey.
Like baseball?
Well, there's no – we always know who the best team is. Like there's no fake champions of the Premier League or any of the domestic leagues in soccer because, hey – we all played each other the same amount of times home and away. This is who the best team is.
And the amount of points you score matters as well, which I like.
Well, I look at this idea like when college football back before they ruined it and expanded the playoff, this idea that we have teams like Alabama last year or 2 years ago when they had TCU made it over them and Alabama's claim was that, well, we lost by 1 score to the 2 best teams we played. And it's like, yeah, but you lost kind of thing. But
yeah, loss is a loss.
In football, where really the difference between winning and losing is that, it's just that one play on there. The idea of a draw or a tie is that, hey, both teams played good enough. Nobody should be penalized for this game is kind of the way I look at it. Both teams played good enough to deserve to win. Both teams could have lost. I don't mind that idea of that not being, hockey was fine with it for the longest time. And I don't want to say ties in baseball or anything necessarily, but I just don't mind the idea of it the way I used to, where it's like certain losses, like, don't need to be held quite as equal. Like, I think an overtime loss almost should have a different category to it, if that makes sense.
Like in hockey.
Right. Like the idea of that if a team loses, because one score games is the most misleading statistic ever in football, because guess what? Every game ends on one score, but when you're down by 14 versus you score that garbage touchdown, that doesn't really matter the same as, well, okay, we lost in overtime. Like right. We go this way with the football, where again, the idea when they changed the overtime rule that, oh my God, Josh Allen didn't get the ball in overtime. Well, we're just going to keep perpetuating that, because, and this is where I go with sucks with football on that one, is that modern defenses aren't meant to defend for 60 minutes. And then we add another quarter onto the game.
Just because they're too good.
Well, it just becomes, you're just, to defend everything you have to defend. It's just the defense is wilt out. Like the idea that, in that Chiefs-Bills game that, if Josh Allen had gotten the ball, because now we had this happen in the playoffs, or it was in the Super Bowl, the go for two thing. Like we're not making this a game about, we're turning sports into a chess match between guys who are not exactly chess players.
Exactly.
But all right, Bill. Well, I'll leave you be. We got a little bit of time to kill till playoffs start today. So I'm thinking,
yes, sir.
I hate the idea that I'm taking all favorites and they've been steamed, but I mean, I gotta, looking at the pitching matchups here. Actually, no, I will say, everybody that's in a deficit, I do.
Mets are the team of destiny, bro.
I don't. Here's what I love about the Mets is that I didn't think that they were even that bad going into the year, and the idea that I don't think this year was built for them to win. I think this year was all about clearing the deck to have a fresh slate for this upcoming free agent class. Who the St. Louis Cardinals will not be a part of any of those guys, by the way. I mean, just cut to the part where the Cardinals sign Michael Wacha. I'm just saying that one. That's going to be their big free agent deal.
The reunion.
I love the idea. Oh, yeah, I meant to mention this in their press conference. The Cardinals demoted their GM. Did you hear the job title they gave to their GM now? He's now the Vice President of Special Projects.
Ouch.
They basically concluded a press conference without having a GM. Their John Mozeliak, the Director of Baseball Operations, is still going to oversee that role. They've announced that they have a succession plan for him. Chaim Bloom is going to take over him at the end of the year. Apparently, they need John Mozeliak to hold his hand for a year to show him how they do things in St. Louis. But the idea is that they're saying is that, well, we're going to be cutting payroll on the field. We're going to be investing into player development. But that doesn't make any sense because you've already mentioned that you're moving on from Paul Goldschmidt, which is like $25 million that frees up this year. And now you've got a guy in who Chaim Bloom, his big claim to fame is that he really does get teams financially into much better places. He's used to doing more with less. So basically what I hear about that one is that they're going to gut the Cardinals completely. Now, if this means that Cardinals players who, this right now, we were talking about this, the Cardinals have a lovely farm system. They always are loaded with top prospects. You sent me a list of all their top draft picks. All of those guys coming up through the minor leagues were still highly touted. For some reason, when they get to St. Louis, they can't perform. But then when they get to another team, they hit their stride. That's a problem. That's what they need to figure out.
I agree.
Like Jordan Walker, he's still young. He's still a kid. We look at this. He's going to be entering his third major league season next year. He's going to be 22 years old. A guy like him, you just give a fucking everyday at bats. He doesn't get better by by being in and out of the lineup. Nobody does. But all right, I hear you typing away. Are you searching something? Or are you doing some work now?
I'm responding to some work email.
All right, well, I'll let you do your thing. We're just dragging on here. So, everybody, thank you for tuning in. If you see this afterwards, like, subscribe, all that good shit. And we'll probably try to have Billy on sometime as the playoffs evolve. So, everybody, thank you. And we'll leave you with my little outro video now.